So take a minute to settle in and check in on the body. Today I want to talk about the path to Nibbana. And the body is such an important tool, such an important part of that. It's really through our body that we know and see the reality of samsara. When we sit down to meditate, it's good to really settle in, make the body comfortable, but also the spine straight. Whether you're sitting or lying down, if the spine is straight, then the path, the channels of energy are open, and you can allow yourself to relax. The meditation object I use most of the time is my breath. I mean, there are other things, loving kindness and elements and various things that are helpful, and sometimes I use them often, but the sort of go-to object for me, at least, is breathing. And it's true for many people, but sometimes it's not. We had someone on retreat last week for whom, when she's asked to focus on her breath, it becomes very, very difficult. So if that's your situation, then please use a different object. Whatever helps you to be calm and comfortable and focused. You want to be relaxed and alert. So breathing in, we're aware that we're breathing in, and then when we breathe out, we're aware we're breathing out, and we can also use the exhalation as a particular opportunity to relax. Notice any tension we're holding in our eyes, our jaw, our shoulders, anywhere else in the face or the neck. Relaxing the arms and the belly, the back. The hips and the thighs, the legs, and just let tension stream out every time you exhale. And then we can also notice how the body feels at this moment. And it changes. This is very important. place to put our attention. How does the body feel at this point in time? Tired or energetic? Aches or pains? Or irritation somewhere? Or is it comfortable? And sometimes some parts of the body are comfortable. But if we have other areas where there's irritation or pain, tightness, and that's usually where our attention goes. And we can bring a little extra kindness to that area, whether it's the back or maybe our eyes are tired, dry, or anywhere else in the body. You might find that you can use your breath as a way to soothe tense areas in the body. And sometimes it's helpful to bring our attention away from those uncomfortable areas and more to the parts that are comfortable. Noticing if there is tension and relaxing. Focus on the meditation object helps us to let go of everything else. And as we attend to the object of meditation, then we are establishing our mindfulness, and with that comes a sense of ease, some pleasant feeling. We can encourage the pleasant feeling to expand. We want to notice if our encouragement for the pleasant feeling to expand brings any tension, because then we're trying too hard. It's just an invitation, really. That's supported by the quality of our attention on our breath or the object you've chosen. As pleasant feeling arises and begins to pervade the body, we can choose whether to go deeper into samadhi or really put attention on loving kindness. So taking some time to invite metta, loving kindness to establish. And we can think about a time when we were kind to someone or someone was kind to us. And notice the feeling that comes with that memory. And notice how that feels in the body. If There's a way of perceiving through the body the feeling that is actually mental from memory or from the moment, this moment being relaxed in the body. And again, we can invite that experience, that felt sense of loving kindness to expand. To expand throughout our body and around us. We can invite that felt sense of loving kindness to expand beyond, widen out towards everyone. Having a sense of goodwill towards everyone in the world. And the same for yourself. Kindness, generosity, let it fill everything, everywhere. When our whole being is filled with loving kindness, our mind is filled with loving kindness, then there are no negative mental states. And we can actually be immersed in this metta. Sometimes people call it metta jhana. Where the mind is free of unwholesome states and the body is tranquil. If we keep our mind on that metta or the breath works with the metta in my experience. And we continue to experience this fullness of loving kindness. And we can abide in this state for as long as we like. This abundant, immeasurable kindness. And of course, mindfulness is there. Tranquility is there. So I'd like to talk about the path to Nibbana, and it's been very inspiring the last couple weeks, being with so many experienced practitioners. And when we were at the ordination in Virginia, so often the monks talked about, encouraging and blessing people with the wish for their realization of Nibbana. And then at the retreat, just talking with so many people who have been practicing for a long time, and of course, really dedicated to the path and making good progress. And I thought I would share something with you. It's a talk, and I'm going to kind of walk you through it. It was a talk given by Ajahn Blian. He's passed away now, but he was Ajahns of Thailand, so very advanced. And I'm sharing the screen with you. And this talk was given in Melbourne, which is where I was staying. My mother and my son and I stayed near Ajahn Kalyano's monastery in 2004 for about about a month. And it was a very powerful experience for me. And see if I can make the screen a little bit better. There, that's better. I have to put your picture somewhere that I can see the screen. So Ajahn Blian was teaching there for about a week, and he gave this talk. I had a recording of it, and later I transcribed it. He spoke in Thai, and Ajahn Kalyano translated. It started with a question from an Anagarika. And by the way, we've put this on our website, so you can download it if you want to, and the text is there as well. And there's a little glossary at the end for all the Pali words that are in here. And so I'm just going to kind of briefly go over it, but you'll have a chance to read it and reread it. If you look on the website, it's on the karunabv.org website under teachings, and when the menu pops up, it's the last item on the menu, from samadhi to the highest goal. I don't exactly know what the menu item says, but it's there. And the first thing that you see below, there's a photo in there. The first thing you see below the photo is a little icon where you can download the talk, the written version. I don't think I have the audio anymore. Okay, so this Anagarika asked Tanajan, so that means Venerable Ajahn Blian, to talk about his own path and practice that took him to see the Dhamma. So Ajahn Blian was known to be an arahant, and he was an incredible monk and teacher. And so he started by saying that he had developed samadhi to the fullest level, bringing it to completion in his practice. And then he went on to really focus on and develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And he particularly focused on the body. And he said, not just my body, but the bodies of other people. And he was contemplating how the body develops from the time it's born, etc., and how it finally meets death. So this whole idea right from the beginning of the impermanence of the body. comparing between what I saw in other people, other beings, and then in my own body. So starting to internalize that insight and developing it out of, first of all, just intellectually thinking about it, remembering the teachings, contemplating them, and then actually starting to bring them in with the power of samadhi. So this is an important point. Like this is so he said he developed samadhi, and then he started to do mindfulness. It doesn't mean we have to do it in that order, but because of the ability to go into samadhi and being able to use the reflections that you gain through mindfulness, that's really where we start to get insight. So bringing them in with the power of samadhi and constant reflection. So he very much emphasizes constantly reflecting on the nature of reality, bringing them into my mind until I could start to see that this body truly is impermanent. And he goes on to talk about the ways that he did this. Just noticing all the time, the impermanent nature of the body and how it was changing. And then he said, when you start to understand the impermanence, and then you also come to seeing the dukkha satcha, the truth of dukkha, talking about how we are expressing dukkha from the moment we're born. He said, the more you thoroughly contemplate this, you can see that there's no single part of the body that's free from illness. And he goes into great detail about thinking about how each body part can be afflicted. He said, if you just look at your head, you get headaches. You can look down through the body and you can see, the problems that we can have with any part of the body. And this is the point of this reflection, is to really try to get the mind to accept the impermanent nature and the suffering nature of the body and all reality as a result. He talked about going through the hospital. You can see all the different kinds of ailments that people would have. And then he says, what hides this truth from us normally is dubhin. This is a Pali word. It means deceit or deceiver. It's like there's a natural tendency for the mind to be deceived by what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, etc. So we constantly forget the true nature of things. And we try to hide it, and we don't want to contemplate it. We like to look at the body as something pleasant and good, and always remember when it's healthy, and we try to forget when it's unhealthy and when it gets ill, when there's pain. And of course, this is a natural coping mechanism that we have as human beings to try to deal with a reality that we don't want to face because we don't see a way out of it. In general, human beings just try to deal with the negative things, and when things are going okay, we want to focus on that, and we hold our breath in fear of something going wrong. But the path of Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, goes in contrast to that, is turning towards the suffering and seeing it for what it is, and then recognizing the way out. So this is all part of that way out, that way to realization of Nibbana. So Ajahn Leon talked more about dukkha and dealing with it. So he said you can contemplate death also to see these three characteristics. So he goes into how you can see as far as possessions go, our wealth, our relatives, our friends, our status, any kind of worldly happiness, all these things that we identify with or associate with, when we die, we can't take any of it with us. And he says, reflecting on that question of what can I take with me when I die is so helpful in starting to bring up insight. So he said, these are the ways that you reflect on wisdom. This is the way he did it. And he reflected on this with regard to other people and himself. And when other people would die, he would think, I'm going to be like that. Now, all of this, to the normal, ordinary, average person, this can sound just like horrible. Why would we do this? Well, it's because what happens is that the mind sees reality and then is relieved. It's very counterintuitive, but that's how it works. So Ajahn Brahm goes on to talk about every generation, all of our family members in past generations have passed away. Where did they go? And he says you go over this again and again, and you can see how it's not helpful to cling to the body. It's anicca, it's dukkha, it's anatta. But at first the mind, the citta doesn't want to accept this truth. It tries to ignore it, to hide it, or resist it. But with constant reflection, many, many times on the three characteristics, focusing on them, contemplating them, that's what starts to lead to a kind of confidence, a belief, an acceptance in the wisdom of the reality of these three characteristics. And this arises in the mind more and more until truth is seen all the time. It becomes a view, or the main way the mind looks at things. It starts to look at things from truth. And then he says you start to see the separation between the mind and the body. But here's the body, and the body's going to die. But the mind does not die with it. And he says, so where does the citta go? Where does the mind go? What happens to that? He said, these kinds of questions start to really bring up insight. They lead to, like what happens to the mind? It's holding on. What is it holding on to at the point of death? And and so on. And then he says, so when we die, it's karma that determines what happens to the mind. He says, penetrating these three characteristics, penetrating the truth of karma, would also bring you to the point as to break through the delusion of a constant self or a sense of continuity or sentiency that normally deludes us. So he talks about this awareness of impermanence is what turns us around away from the delusion. He also goes into how we can learn about the dukkha of the body just from noticing our posture. It's like we can't sit, stand, walk, or lie down in one position for very long. We have bodily aches. We need to move. And he says it's this movement that obscures our understanding of how much dukkha the body holds. But as soon as we start applying mindfulness and wisdom and reflecting on it, we can start to break through that illusion and really take in the dukkha. As you can tell, this is a pretty intense talk. And if you can imagine sitting there listening with Ajahn Brahm going for quite a long time each time in Thai, and then Ajahn Kalyana repeating it in English. It had there was an opportunity to really absorb it, to really feel it. So sometimes when we read the suttas and it talks about, well, you can tell that the body's not yours because you don't have control over it. We find that hard to understand. But in this discourse, it feels to me like Ajahn Blian helps to make it quite clear. He's talking about doing this constant reflection on the true nature of the body, the impermanence of it, the dukkha of it, the non-self reality of it. And he says, it becomes very obvious that we can't control the body. So I can change posture, I can eat food when I'm hungry, I can lie down and sleep when I'm tired, all the day, as long as we are not reflecting, not using insight into the three characteristics and the different things we get caught up in, different activities, are actually feeding the sense of self and the delusion, and gives us the impression that we can control the body. And that's under our control and under our influence. But as soon as we strip that delusion down through insight, through satipatthana, he's saying here, it becomes very obvious we can't control the body. It's beyond our control. We can't stop it getting painful. We can't stop it aching. We can't stop it going through all different changes that it does go through, from birth right through until death. We can't stop it getting ill. He said, no one can do that. No one can stop their hair from falling out. No one can stop their teeth from falling out. You can tell it not to get old, but it won't listen. So this is where he's like really driving that whole concept home of how this body is not us. So he says you need to ask yourself these questions over and over again. And the more and more it is telling you that none of the parts of the body will do what you want. He said this reflection took him a long time to develop, constantly reflecting on these three characteristics over and over again, because the mind does not want to accept this easily. And then he says you get to the point where you see impermanence, where you have, what you have to do is to keep contemplating until you see this truth clearly for yourself without any doubt. And it becomes an aramana of the mind, the basis of the mind. And then he says there becomes a time when there's confidence in that truth. Once you see it everywhere, whether it's coarse in anything, coarse, refined, high, low, whatever, if that truth is penetrated, it cannot help but give a confidence, a belief that this is the way it is. This is reality. And with that confidence, then it gives rise to a sense of internal contentment and happiness, because you know that this is the truth and there is no more doubt. There's no more uncertainty about it. You know beyond a doubt that this is the truth, so there's nothing to suffer about. This is when the realization comes, this is the experience. It's like, and there's this huge relief and happiness. You can accept it, you can be happy with it. But it does come with this constant, through this constant and determined practice. He said, this is something that's difficult to achieve, and there's no other way of putting it. One cannot just easily reflect on these things and suddenly it just pops into the mind. One has to really put effort into the practice and be very, very thorough, very, very constant and consistent in one's reflection and contemplation, until gradually these delusions of our mind are overcome. And he talks more about how to do that until the belief is unshakable. He said we see the same way the Buddha saw. He goes on to say we don't have any title deed to the body. We have to let it all go. Talks about kilesas arising in the mind. Says, so the more we develop this understanding, the more we want to use the body for practice rather than just allow for following defilements. We want to use it to do good for practicing. You can compare the body to a boat on the ocean, so that even those are holes in it. You have to keep bailing out the water and using the body as long as you can. And he says, even though you gain insight into the body, Vinicca Dukkha Anatta, it's not that we give up the body or forget about it or don't look after it. So we want to maintain it and take care of it. This means that with this realization, we let go of Sakaya Ditti. So this is the experience of stream entry, letting go of that idea, that view of the body as a permanent self or any of the khandhas, going beyond doubt about the Buddha's path and the Buddha's teachings. We can see the way the Buddha saw, we can see the three characteristics, we can let go of the sila bhatta paramasa, the clumsy, deluded fumbling at rites and rituals or external practices of sila. So the sila becomes internalized, it's not external, it's not just going through the motions or following the rules. It's what makes, it becomes part of a way you look at the world. It's the normal way to be moral and avoid unwholesome ways of behavior. So again, sila is very much the ground of our practice. And it becomes more and more refined the more we see the nature of reality. And so he talks here about the Venerable Ayya Kondanya, how he experienced this realization during the first teaching of the Buddha. And then when that is solid, Ajahn Blian says that the question arises about what doesn't fall apart. What doesn't arise, what doesn't get born, what doesn't fall apart. So this is the search for Nibbana. One who abandons or casts down the burden of the khandhas is going to be happy. And at that point, one does not wish for any future births, any future attachments. What that means is you've really seen the burden, you've uprooted craving and attachment completely without remainder. So here he's talking about really awakening. There's no desire left in the mind. So this could be like non-returning, but then when all of the kilesas are uprooted completely, that's arahantship. He says it doesn't really matter how long it takes, you just keep going. You have no choice. And so the Buddha was a lokavidu, he knew the world, and he lived like a drop of water on the back of a lotus leaf. His mind was pure and clean and radiant, but not attached to the world. And so he says the Buddha and all the Kruba Ajahns that we respect as having practiced the path, which means those who have realized Nibbana, completely finished their work, are just like that drop of water on a lotus leaf. They live in the world, but their mind is pure and unattached, transcendent. There's no stress, no suffering in the mind. There's no delusion about desire. One doesn't seek anything at all. Focused on cessation, experiencing cessation. the end of dukkha. That's Nibbana. It's the highest happiness, it's emptiness, it's the deathless. So how do we realize this? We have to mature our indriya, our spiritual faculties, to the point where this realization takes place. And then he goes through the 5 faculties. We're going to be talking about that this afternoon. The sada indriya, our faith, our confidence has to help to develop to the point where it's completely unshakable, imperturbable, unsoilable. And he goes on through the other faculties or powers. However long it takes, we don't know, but we just keep doing it. And he says, you start off with a small torch with 1 battery, so it's a flashlight. And then you keep adding batteries and building up the light until it shows up all aspects of reality and clears away all the darkness, so everything is revealed. This is what happens when insight matures to the point where the 5 spiritual faculties are fully developed. Then we understand everything. We understand all aspects of reality and we let go of all attachments, all defilements. So his last statement was, I encourage you all to keep up with your practice. Don't give up, and I'm sure you'll reach the completion of the goal. Okay. I hope you download it and get to read it many times and really reflect on it. Any comments? Yes, Lisa?
Sorry, I don't know if you're finished with your talk, Ayya, but I have a question that I want to ask while I can still try to formulate it. Something that always comes up for me with the discussion of the khandhas. Okay, the way to Nibbana is, the way to liberation is letting go of attachment to the khandhas, to these heaps or aggregates that we normally associate with our self.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the question that came up in the reading you just took us through, what is left? Mm-hmm. And there's something that's often referred to as the mind. There's something about the mind that's liberated or deathless, unborn. But what I normally associate with the mind is a lot of mental formations, includes a lot of mental formations, which is one of the khandhas. So it's not that, but something that.
Yeah, so the clarification here is that it's not the mind that's unborn, it's Nibbana. And Nibbana is thought of as an element, just like you would have the earth element or the water element. The Nibbana element is that which does not get born and does not die. So it's a realization. It's not one of the khandhas, or it's not an aspect of the khandhas. Now, the Arahants will talk about the mind as continuing. Sometimes they'll talk about mind as an element. So there's this continuation from rebirth to rebirth to rebirth that is, as Ajahn Blian said, directed by the Kamma. So the direction we go, the fuel is our desire, our craving, this unfinished, unsettled business that we have that keeps going. But the realization of Nibbana, when we really, really practice in this way that Ajahn Blian practiced, and we really, really get this reality, then the Nibbana element is what we're focused on. And I've even heard people say it is kind of like, that's what we enter into. So it's not the mind that's unborn, but but all of the activity that would continue on ordinarily just goes still. I mean, maybe we could say absorbed in the Nibbana element. It's the realization of Nibbana that causes that stillness and complete happiness to come.
Okay, I guess I'm getting that Nibbana is just something we can't really come up with the words for, other than saying it's not what we normally experience as reality.
I mean, the Buddha did use many descriptors for it, like the highest happiness, and the ending of greed, hatred, and delusion. So, and there's, like, I heard a talk of Ajahn Sucitto recently, and he talking about Nibbana. And he said that these moments when there are no defilements present in the mind, that's a moment of Nibbana. I mean, certainly when the stream entry experience happens, there's this glimpse of this taste of Nibbana. So it's when there's all this desire and aversion and all of the craving and the movement and the gotta have this or gotta do that or solve this problem or plan this thing, whatever it is, that all goes still. And the, like I said, the sort of counterintuitive reality of it is that there is this incredible happiness that comes from it. I mean, even at the point of stream entry, where there's this unshakable kind of solidity of understanding and having no doubt in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha anymore, it's joyful.
Okay, thank you. I guess a word that comes to mind when you're talking is I'm looking for words to try to describe it more, and the word liberation.
Yeah,
Is,
sure. That's liberation. Yes, and it's hard to imagine from our ordinary consciousness how this works. That's why the samadhi part of it is so important. So when we look at those 5 faculties, it's the unshakable confidence, it's the mindfulness, it's the energy to practice, it's the samadhi, it's the wisdom.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, Julie. I think you're still muted, my dear.
Thank you for this. This is wonderful, and as you said a number of times, it will take constant reflection of this over and over again in order to make it yours, which I have found in the past is the way to kind of move along, is that one needs to really reflect on these truths. But I have had a question for some time, and it kind of came up now. And that is, I've sometimes heard your mind and consciousness kind of as one, or they can be one or the other. And I wondered how you would explain that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it comes up for people a lot. So people who have realized these truths completely often use language in a different way, and in different ways from each other. So when we talk about consciousness, for example, there are different meanings for the word. So the consciousness that is the consciousness that makes sense of what's happening with sight, sound, smells, tastes, touches, even thoughts. That's not the kind of consciousness that is being talked about when they talk about the consciousness that realizes Nibbana, or that the realization of Nibbana is related to. So consciousness continuing in that way, and continuing isn't quite the right way to talk about it, I think. But Ajahn Sumedho's talk, that I don't know if it's still on, I'm sure it's still on the PFOD website from last spring, is helpful. And then I don't know if you've listened to, I gave a series on the khandhas not too long ago, and the consciousness talks about these two different definitions for consciousness.
And is that on YouTube?
Yes, it's on our YouTube channel.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, and so sometimes they'll say the mind never dies, the chitta never dies, things like that. And I think really what's happening there is a different perspective on chitta. It's the perspective almost like the chitta element. Sometimes they'll talk about it as like the chitta element. Again, it's a purification of the concept of chitta, not the mind we're used to that's dealing with all the defilements. And I think the key, I mean, for all of you who have sometimes experienced deep samadhi, then you may have realized things that once you come out of that state, you can't really describe, or you can't even make sense of. You know it's true, but from this normal consciousness, ordinary consciousness, it's just, we're in such a different dimension in a way. That I think this is probably why we see these masters saying things and using different words for the same kind of thing. I mean, I've even heard Ajahn Sumedho, he talks about Nibbana and mindfulness and, pure consciousness, and it all means the same thing. Oh, there's a link to the consciousness talk. Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, thank you, Julie. I hope that helps.
All right, thank you. Until I can understand it better, why? Thank you for your words.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just like kind of wave the hand and say it's ineffable, because we can do better than that. We can look at the Buddha's definitions, being free from greed, hatred, and delusion. Can we actually imagine that? How much can we experience that? And it only comes through this kind of ongoing, dedicated, continual reflection.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome, Julie. Thank you for the question. Joyce?
This was totally incredible. It's providing a missing piece of something that I've been, I don't know if the word reflecting or contemplating over several months. Did I say already that missing piece? I'm trying to coordinate my thoughts and I'm kind of nervous. I'm always nervous when I speak. This all started quite a while ago. I was thinking about dukkha, because we use that word very casually. means a lot of things. And it's like one of the deepest teachings of the Buddha. He says, I teach only suffering and the end of suffering. So I started to read everything I could find about dukkha. And then, of course, let's see now. Oh no, don't let me blank. Please don't let me blank. And then I was thinking about the Buddha, the time of his enlightenment, and the Mara visiting. And instead of seeing some evil being coming, I was thinking, it's something in the mind. And then I got caught off on the difference between animals and humans. And what is the difference? It's the mind. And it's kind of a tormentor sometimes. It often is. And I'm not quite sure where I want to go with this, but a lot of what was being said in this talk just fit with what I've been contemplating. Oh, and that led me to really dig into the first three noble truths. Just really try to get those. And one thing that came out of this is suddenly, when I first started practicing, it just seemed like we got this smorgasbord of things that we can do. And I didn't know how to sort that out. But after I went through this process to the point where I am now, I can now see, so those are ways to address this problem of dukkha. I mean, both the Eightfold Path and like Satipatthana. I don't know, I'm not sure. I just want to report this because it's just so phenomenal that you have presented this just beautiful talk. I'm definitely going to read it multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was walking on, I'm not going to go real far with this, but I've talked about this before where when I'm walking, I feel like the landscape is moving. I'm being walked or something. But the other day I had just a really profound experience of this happening. And I could just see, the changing nature of everything around me. I was moving through something. And then I started to reflect on the aggregates. And obviously, all this nature does not have consciousness, but I could see the impermanence of that. And then I started to see it in myself.
Yeah.
And this is not really crystallized yet, obviously, but it's really exciting. So I just so appreciate this. Thank you.
Yes. Beautiful. And we'll talk more this afternoon. I think you might be there too, about, how the confidence we develop and really realize how looking at that, noticing it, reflecting upon the confidence we've gained helps us to carry on and go deeper. Thank you, Joyce. Carrie?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm having mudita for Joyce. That's great. We're living here in assisted living, and it's essentially total immersion, old age, sickness, and death.
Yeah.
And I when I'm sitting in the dining hall with people that are in really all stages of decrepitude, I know that it's a great area for practice, but I can't help also noticing that I'm othering them, that I really have, and not only othering, but aversion, like I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to be past 85. So I'm wondering, since I have this real great opportunity to really be immersed in a community of people that I care about who are going through these things, how I might help diminish that sense of otherness that really is a kind of a natural thing that will arise in me.
Yeah. I think it's exactly what Ajahn Blean did when he said he would look every time he would think about or see this in someone else, he would turn towards himself and say, this is what I'll have too. This is also what my own body is subject to. And really take that in, like, what if I am like that 95-year-old or whoever you're seeing in the dining room? What if I am like that at that point? you know, can I really see this collection of khandhas in its true light and not want it anymore? And then not have aversion to it, but kindness. You know, like whenever aversion arises, as you're with the people, aversion, of course, not to them, but to their condition, then kindness and understanding, realization of this is the way nature is. This is the way the body I think of as mine is, and it's not mine. It's like a borrowed set of clothes. It's okay that it gets holes in it, it wears out. That's its nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess if I also notice the otherness, to just hold that kindly, that is also going to be there.
Yeah, yeah. If we're kind to ourselves as we see the defilements there, we want to be firm, but also kind. And as you could see, I considered what it would be like to read the entire talk out to you. Keep you for an extra couple hours. I thought, no, my voice will be sore. And I think it's better for you to read the full thing yourself. And it's very repetitive because it's a modeling for what we need to do ourselves, to be very repetitive. To really bring our mind to the point of understanding this, of, like he said, first intellectually and then at that deep level of realization, where what's left is kindness. We don't own anything. We'll take nothing with us except our karma. So it's that's what will do it. And you've taken such a huge step to realize that aversion or to realize that resistance. And this is exactly what our minds do. This is a natural built-in coping mechanism for living in samsara.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.